stuff. Good luck.
So lucky for you guys, because we are running behind time, you don't have time for my bad jokes. So let's get into the slides, OK? So picking up from where Dheeraj mentioned, in simple layman's terms, this is the journey that we've been on, right? We started with hyperconverging infrastructure. We're essentially moving to hyperconverging clouds. And on purpose, I didn't use the word hybrid clouds. As Dheeraj mentioned, there's a lot of hybrid washing that's been going around, and it's important before we get into the product roadmap to really understand what made hyperconvergence stand out. Just the definition. So hyperconverging infrastructure was all about what we're calling honest convergence. Because there was already converged infrastructure, right? And converged infrastructure from the last 10 years was about what I would call as sheet metal innovation. Essentially packaging in a rack, whether it's a vBlock or FlexPod-like capabilities, without actually innovating in software, which is essentially what HCI did. It hyper-converged infrastructure via software. And so when you apply that same logic to the world of hybrid cloud, as to what we mean by honest convergence, that's where we think there's going to be a seminal change in terms of how we view the new software in a world of multi-cloud. And so if you think about hybrid cloud today, what does hybrid cloud do? Most of hybrid cloud definition simply says, I've got Amazon, Azure, private clouds, and so forth, and I have a management plane that will allow me to kind of help provision and maybe do some operations. But the hard part of hybrid cloud is not in the control plane, but it's in merging control and data together. And we just saw Chris talk to Dheeraj about the fact that clouds have to go to where data is. You can't bring data to clouds. And so that's one reason why fundamentally we believe there is a whole new set of opportunities in front of us in this world of multiple clouds. All the way from public clouds to private clouds, but also the new type of clouds, such as edge clouds, distributed clouds, or extended clouds. And the innovation that's required there is about converging control plane and data plane. And that's essentially the roadmap for our enterprise cloud platform. So when we call it enterprise cloud, we don't mean private cloud. We mean everything that the enterprise covets, independent of location or independent of form factor. So this journey that Dheeraj hinted towards, starting with hyperconverging infrastructure to going to hyperconverging clouds, the way we have broken it down, as some of you have already figured out by now, but for everybody's benefit, is in these three phases, abstracted by these solution categories called core, essentials, and enterprise. And when we start with core, it's about obviously starting with HCI for your data center modernization, expanding to build a true private cloud. Some of you have heard me say that before you do hybrid, there is no hybrid without actually having two clouds at least. Public cloud exists, but a true private cloud still hasn't been manifested in a mainstream enterprises. So you still have to do that. And then you can expand your horizons to a world of multi-cloud services. And so when we start this, let's break this down. So this session will go through each of these and talk about product and capabilities that are available today as well as coming tomorrow. The core product, and this is something that, especially in the last 12 months, we've really doubled down. And internally, we call it strengthening the core. And a whole slew of functionality has come in our core data path, core management plane, and our core hypervisor functionality. 5.10, in case some of you haven't figured it out yet, came out yesterday, and it bundles in some significant enhancements to our core AOS functionality. An example of that is that we now have collapsed what traditionally you would have called as VMware's SRM functionality into the core product. So you can now get one-click DR runbooks built into the core workflows. That includes not just DR at a protection domain level, but at a VM-centric level, so that you're actually using it like you would use DR or any workflows in a public cloud. But apart from some of these core functionality, there is a foundational new aspect that has been released as part of 5.10. And this is probably the first time we've probably had such a big change in our core data path since maybe when we first came up with 1.0. And this has taken some of our best engineers. Our core principal engineers have been working on this for about 2.5 years. And the primary driver for this is twofold. One, the landscape of apps have changed, clearly, as you guys know. The other thing is the fact that the landscape of technologies have also changed and are changing. So if you capture the best of what's coming around the corner, which is a new generation of apps and tech, needs a new generation of AOS. So what I'm really proud to announce is the fact that in many years, we haven't refactored our core data path to the way it is right now, where in addition to having a global metadata data plane, we have now distributed metadata into the local data stores as well, so that fundamentally, things such as sustained write performance is now almost doubled, to the point where, with this new technology called AES, you can now confidently run mainstream applications, mission-critical applications, scale-up databases like SAP HANA or healthcare database and so forth on Nutanix. Okay? And this is manifested with the official certification of our product with SAP HANA. And in fact, Chris came up on stage. It took us about 1.5 years to actually get certified on SAP. Some of you may know this. And again, just like everybody else, the test team there is very robust. It's been, if I can call it, validated over years using the classical 3-tier technology. And they were not a fan of using HCI for the classical construct of SAP HANA. And we had to use AES as the underpinning to not only show that it was easy to manage and operate, but it was actually faster than your traditional infrastructure. And so talk about this journey that we've had with Nutanix across all these workloads, essentially as a way to even run SAP in their mainstream environments. My great pleasure to call one of our friends from Italy on board. Eduardo, you want to come up?
Hi, Sunil.
Good to see you, sir.
Very excited to be here. Thank you very much.
I would have been more excited if you brought us some gifts of the products that you make. How many of you guys know what Faretta Group does? They don't make beer.
Very few.
They don't make wine. They definitely don't make any gelato. But they make some great boats.
Indeed.
So tell us a little bit about Faretta, man.
Actually, this is what we do. We are an Italian company of luxury craftsmen. We hold 7 brands of luxury yacht, which are probably the very well known is Riva Yachting. And
you can come closer, man. I won't bite. We are fit in the store. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So you make fancy boats.
Indeed, we do.
Yeah.
We make luxury yacht.
Yeah.
And actually, the collaboration between Nutanix and Faretta started between my arrival in the company, with a colleague who should be in the hall here. And so what we do is we started in 2015.
So you started. So let's talk about the journey now that you guys had, which is almost 3 years ago. Right? Almost 3 years ago. You started in 2015, 2016.
In fact, we used to have a CAD system which was running on legacy hardware, very costly for maintaining. and with the performance which was not very good at all. And we started migrating the CAD system with NX onto Nutanix, and we definitely discovered that that was the right path to follow. In fact, the performance improvement and the less cost of maintaining the Nutanix platform was definitely the good choice for us, and this led us in the coming years to migrate the core application of the company onto this platform.
Got it. And obviously, you have some plans coming up for DR and essentially building the Faretta cloud.
Exactly. So we migrated basically the CAD system and corporate email, and in 2018, we started moving SAP onto Nutanix.
Got it. So your back-end ERP system of SAP is also running on Nutanix, and
Exactly.
then you're going to do some DR and business continuity going forward.
Exactly.
And what's the summary of the net effect, though, within the company because of using Nutanix?
We basically had two main advantages, which was a return on investment very fast, 18 months. From a financial point of view, from that 18 months later on, that was only gaining from us. And it is a 35% more or less better time to market for the performance improvement of the CAD system, which led us to be close to the customer, easier to project, to engineering the bots, and that led us to have a very, very good performance improvement and a better return on investment.
Got it, got it. And so thanks for the collaboration and the partnership.
Thank you.
And next time any of you guys are in Venice, make sure you look up Eduardo. He'll take you for a ride in one of the Faretta boats.
Thank you very much,
right.
Sunil. Bye.
See you guys. Eduardo's a great guy. His partners who have actually started with Nutanix, it's a great team out there. In fact, one of the things that I picked up as people shifted their roles and they moved on to do bigger and better things, starting with Nutanix, some of you, again, may have known this, is that you don't get fired for buying IBM or VMware, but you get promoted for buying Nutanix. So, So you guys get the first score, a lot of focus, a lot of innovation, doubling down, extending our lead, as you've seen with the Gartner mention that we just talked about with MQ. If anything, the gap will only keep increasing just because of the foundational design is sound and built from the ground up rather than being an extension of the current architectures, right? So obviously, you can't really get to the multi-cloud world without going through building a true private cloud. And this is where the next phase of our journey comes in, which is how do you actually leverage between operationalizing stuff from Prism Pro, securing things using Flow, and automating using Calm. And again, in the last 12 months, there's been continuous innovation between 5.5 to 5.10 in the last 4 quarters. A lot of features, while maintaining the quality, has been sort of made mainstream. And rather than let me talk through each of them, let me call one of the usual suspects that always shows up on stage during these demos, my friend Rajiv on stage. Come on up, Rajiv. So wait. Let me do the jokes first, okay? You do the demo. So, Binny, who's the other CTO, we had this thing on Slack about a few months ago which said, we have all these Indian guys in this company, but we also have some non-Indians. What would we name these non-Indian guys with some Indian names? It's all true story, by the way. I'm not making it up.
Actually, yeah.
Like, for example, my friend Lou Atanasio was named as Vindaloo, okay? I didn't come up with that joke, okay? But then Binny actually said, look, actually we can make an Indian name even more Indian, believe it or not. So Rajiv Mirani essentially became Rajiv Biryani. Okay.
So Sunil,
just because he likes food that much doesn't mean that we have to give him that.
just a word of advice. Don't make fun of people's last names. Not a good look on you.
Okay. My last name. That's a whole keynote in itself. Okay, let's come back to, so what are we talking about the demo now?
Yeah, so one of the things we focus on is freeing IT from routine administrative tasks through all of an application's lifecycle, things like you mentioned provisioning, securing, and automating app management. Earlier this year, we launched Calm, which makes deploying enterprise workloads as easy as essentially installing an app on your iPhone. And I have an example app store over here, enterprise app store over here, and it's got some sort of the familiar applications, MS SQL, Veeam, Kubernetes, and a whole bunch more. But let's start with something a little bit more challenging. You mentioned that we are now certified for SAP HANA, but beyond just certification, we actually did a little bit more. We've created a Calm blueprint to make deployment of SAP HANA really, really simple. So let's go ahead and see how that works. I go ahead and launch the blueprint, leave it as a default project. Takes a few seconds. I give it a name. Let's call it HANA London. And all I have to do is give it an SID and an instance number. In this case, I'll just leave them as the defaults. There's other things I can tweak. I can play around with things like, for example, how much memory I want to give this particular instance. Default is 32. Let's say we want to do 128. And that's pretty much it. At this point, I can go ahead and create the HANA instance. Note that when I change the memory from 30 to 128, the blueprint automatically does things like calculate what the storage needed for redo buffers, so the database itself, for shared folders, and all of that is. So all of that is completely automated. And with just a few clicks, I've been able to get to the point where this SAP HANA instance is being provisioned already. So something that would have taken many days, something that would have taken multiple teams to coordinate with each other, can be done in just a few clicks.
Got it.
It takes about, yeah, go ahead.
This is an example of where if you truly have this combination of infrastructure-aware apps packaged through Calm, is where you can break down the silos of compute storage along with the app administration that's required for day 0, day 1 provisioning.
Exactly. If we wait about 8 minutes or so, this actually will be fully provisioned. So it's really, really quick.
So let's look at another application in the meantime. Is that what we're
Yeah, let's switch gears a little bit and take a look at some of the day 2 operations as well that we can do with applications. And for that, I will use a WordPress application. And just like with HANA, I can get this deployed in just a few clicks.
And through Calm, obviously, we have the ability to provision these blueprints, not just on-premise, but across AWS, Azure, and now GCP, and so forth.
Yes,
right?
completely multi-cloud, so it supports all the big 3 public clouds and on-prem as well. And this particular WordPress application contains several VMs. It includes some database VMs, some web tiers, and so on. And one of the things I have to give it is a password for my database. So I'm going to give a nice password. And again, in just a few seconds, we'll have this up and running. There you go. All right, so the WordPress application is being provisioned at this point. And what I'm going to do is, again, it takes a few minutes to get fully provisioned, so we'll switch over Cooking Show style to a couple of instances that I installed earlier, WordPress site for our Epoch and our Flow products. So these days, when you deploy an application like that, what's the first thing that you expect will happen?
I don't know. Somebody's going to hack your app and maybe mine Bitcoins or something?
Exactly. So essentially, when you deploy an application today, it's probably going to have a whole bunch of bots try to attack it right away. And if you haven't secured it, it's very likely that in a certain amount of time, it will get hacked. And I'm going to simulate that. I have a little script over here that does brute force passwords against the database part of the WordPress application. It's going to try the most common passwords, and hopefully have a few minutes before it gets to Nutanix.123 and breaks into my database. So this kind of a hack is actually quite simple to protect using our microsegmentation feature through Flow. But before we can do that, we actually understand what the application behavior looks like. How do VMs behave normally without a hack before we can get to the point where we can figure out what the policy should look like? And we now have a new feature using our security planning page that lets us visualize exactly how traffic is flowing between all the VMs that we have deployed at this point. This actually is derived from the NetSil technology that we acquired earlier this year. So again, it shows how all these acquisitions are contributing both to products in their own right, but also extending things that we have. And here we can see a lot of detail on all the flows between VMs. But let's zoom out a bit and say we want to group this by services. And now it becomes pretty clear what's happening. We have external traffic that goes to HTTP port 80 on a load balancer. From there, it goes to a web tier, and then to a database. I can also see my hacking VM, the VM from which I ran the script, attacking the database automatically. So now I have enough information to go and create a security policy. I'll go to security policies. In fact, I actually pre-created one. And I have it in monitor mode, so it's not being enforced right now. But you can see it pretty much captures what we just saw. Our external traffic goes to a load balancing tier, from there to the web tier, and from there to a database tier. So let me go ahead and apply this policy. All right, it's been submitted. So in a few seconds now, we should see that the password hack no longer works. And there you can see the socket has started timing out. So very simple to secure your freshly deployed application.
So essentially, Flow obviously has this built-in distributed virtual firewall that you can provision like AWS security groups in simple clicks.
Very similar to security.
Without requiring the burden of a full-blown additional stacks such as NSX or stuff like that. But it also has other functionality, including service chaining and
yeah, it's got a whole bunch of other things. It does network visibility, some of which we saw, but it's got a lot more. It can provision top-of-rack switches, load balancers, firewalls, and do seamless service insertion of layer 2 devices as well. So it's fairly rich feature functionality.
Got it.
All right. So security events are one kind of event that happen in the data center, but there are other events too, and often we want to react to them in an autonomic way rather than having to have human beings involved. And by an analogy, if you're used to using something like IFTTT in your personal life, I use it a lot for getting notifications on various things. For example, I have a few things set up here, one of which is, it sends me an email if there's rain in the forecast. I think in London that would just qualify as spam, but in California it's actually useful because we don't get very much rain. And wouldn't it be great if we had the same kind of capability in the enterprise as well? And that's exactly what we're doing with a new capability we have recently introduced called XPlay. And it's manifested through something we call Playbooks. And to show you how they work, let me create a new playbook. I start by selecting a trigger, in this case, an alert. So let's say we want an alert for unusually high number of HTTP requests from a single IP address. When that happens, we want to quarantine the VM automatically using Flow. We want to send an email. I know Sunil likes getting these personally, so I'll put his email address in there. I'll take a snapshot of the VM so that I can debug it later. And finally, I want to resolve the alert so that I don't have to deal with it again. I go ahead and save that. I enable the alert, give it the playbook, give it a name, auto quarantine, and go ahead and save that. While I'm saving, it's doing a few validation checks, and very quickly we have created this new playbook. Let's actually see one of these playbooks in action. I created one a little while earlier that is somewhat similar. It's triggered on an unusually high number of database requests. So it should have gotten triggered when we created our script and started trying to hack the VM. It collects security logs and then sends a Slack message to me. And if I look at the history of this particular playbook, you can see it actually did execute just a few seconds ago at 10:29 a.m. I can do my Slack, and I can see this particular alert did appear on my Slack messages just recently.
Got it, got it. Is there any other Slack messages? Is this like a real-time thing?
Oh, you guys
Check
sent me
mine.
something?
I just sent you something.
Nice haircut. Well, yeah.
All right, man. Good job.
But
Good job, Steve.
it costs a lot less than yours.
IFTTT for the enterprise is actually pretty cool functionality in Prism Pro coming soon. Check it out at the demo booths. So, we've covered quite a lot, as you guys have seen, on the core services. But look, to be the underlying platform for multiple workloads, you have to support multiple, sort of scenarios. And especially with AHV and Prism Point Calm becoming mainstream, it's now powering some of our largest customers. Some of these customers, some of them are in the room here, but one of the world's largest financial cloud. It used to have thousands of OpenStack nodes are now being re-platformed with Nutanix, as an example, right? And to talk about one of our best success stories, even not because of size, but based on quality, here's one of our local friends, Ryan from University of Reading. Come on up, Ryan. So how was your ride in so far?
Not too bad. The wind and rain from the hotel just out the back wasn't too bad.
Okay,
so,
you stayed at the loft. Got it. So University of Reading, tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so we're a university in Reading, funnily enough, which is Berkshire, which is about 40 miles from here. So we're a research and teaching intensive university, which is where I come in. So I'm the head of academic computing, so I look after the researchers and all of their wonderful workloads they like to come up with.
Got it, got it. So you started with us, what, a couple of years ago?
Yeah, it's about 2.5 years now.
Tell us a little bit about the journey.
Yeah, so we had a big reorganization within the university for IT. There was a lot of IT provided out in the field, so different schools, departments had their own clusters, their own storage, their own compute, and it was realized that it didn't work. So they merged us all together. We tried to run the separate systems individually, and it didn't work. There was too much complexity in different systems, different technologies to understand, and we spent all our time keeping the lights on. So we came to Nutanix, and we now have one simple platform that runs underneath. So we started with the core, as Dheeraj sort of put it earlier, and we had AHV to just run VMs and go for there. We've then elevated from there to move into self-service. We've got files, we're processing data all locally on the cluster, and actually we now have one cluster which does all our workloads rather than lots of individual things. So we can actually support our users rather than keeping the lights on. Got it,
got it. And so, as you were telling me yesterday about it's now 90% self-service, what's the plan going forward?
I'm going to drink a lot more coffee.
Okay, that's always a good idea.
Yeah, we can do things like come to events like this because we don't have to worry that the cluster's going to break. But it's basically elevating for the customer to do what they need to do when they need to do it. If that be on our cloud on-prem, or if that be in the public cloud. So we've got all the integrations now through Calm to use Azure and AWS, and hopefully we'll integrate with GCP soon as well. So we can actually just let the user do the right workload in the right place. And we can actually support those users in running their scripts, maintaining their scripts, understanding when they've got bugs, rather than sort of putting that on hold, sort of say, well, I just need to go and replace a disk in a file or somewhere.
Got it. Thanks a lot, man. Thanks for all the support, okay?
Thanks.
Ryan. So essentially, as Ryan was saying, look, we've come a long way powering, one of our best partner workloads, Citrix, continues to be one of our big partnerships with respect to VDI, and then coming a long way since then to power enterprise apps and now mission-critical apps such as SAP and so forth. But as the world changes to also transform from a data perspective, where we went from block storage to now having a variety of data sources, such as files, objects, and the world of containers, we've started releasing a bunch of capabilities along the way that you guys know, right? So starting with files, which has been sort of, it's a very fond product for me and a whole bunch of us because it was our first net new product that came out 2 years ago beyond the core AOS and Prism capabilities. And it's been on fire. More than, almost close to 1,000 customers worldwide have started using it. And all of that was it becoming mainstream from a multi-protocol support. It now has NFS capabilities, SMB capabilities, full-blown multi-protocol support. But in addition to that, Files now is coming up with a way to transform data natively at the source into insights with file-based analytics, right, out of the box. And so if you have a chance, I would strongly urge you guys to take a look at files. If you haven't already looked at it as consolidating file services from NetApp into the common AOS substrate, okay? There's a bunch of demos there, as well as breakout sessions, and a ton of production-grade capabilities, petabytes of data being managed with files right now. And that same functionality in the same architecture is now being extended for objects with a fully, if I can call it S3-compatible APIs, but with one difference within the 1.0 product that's coming out is because of the underlying framework being highly scalable, because it's running on the same quote-unquote storage architecture that powers blocks and files, it also out of the box has RBAC, worm functionality, a bunch of enterprise-grade functionality in 1.0 coming out pretty soon. That'll be targeted for the 5.11 timeframe. And then last but not least is providing all this functionality, but in the form of, for Kubernetes and next-generation cloud-native applications. You're going to hear Greg come on stage tomorrow, along with Satyam on IoT, to talk about our cloud-native stack and our portfolio of cloud-native services underpinning with Carbon as the substrate, obviously overlaying Epoch for observability, and then extending that with a bunch of developer services such as Era and so forth, okay? But all of these put together is what really leads us to believe that we have a cloud platform for most workloads. And then, of course, last but not least, is the evolution towards this multi-cloud world. In the multi-cloud world, as you probably have seen from our announcement today morning, is about the launch of Xi Cloud Services. Xi, as you know, was originally the cloud platform for the substrate of extending our Nutanix as a service inside data centers worldwide, starting initially with Nutanix data centers, but also extended with partner data centers eventually. But over a period of time, over the last 6-9 months, as we've collected a bunch of these multi-cloud services such as Frame, IoT, and so forth, we've branded them so that you can actually consume them from a single catalog, single sign-on experience, single billing experience, and so forth. And that's what this multi-cloud portfolio looks like. And to just give you a preview of something that we're going to be showing you tomorrow, is this is just not about enterprise services, it's also about the edge, it's about living life on the edge, where we now have a core product that powers an intelligent edge with what was called as Sherlock that is now coming out as GA with Xi IoT. It's a fundamentally new approach. It burns in, as Dheeraj said, message queuing, container functionality, storage substrates, as well as synchronization back to your core data center as well as public cloud services, all in one integrated package. So look for that later today as well as in the keynote tomorrow. But that was just a focus on the edge as a new upcoming, if I can call it, form factor. There is another form factor, as I mentioned, that's also emerging. This is something that's unique, which is there's a whole bunch of workloads that you want to extend from your data center and consume as a service, but you don't want to change your operational tools. Because today, when you consume workloads on Amazon or Azure, rightfully for elastic reasons or for net new cloud-native reasons, we can harmonize the control plane. The data plane convergence is very hard. Imagine doing, as we have always said, doing desktops to be spilled over on demand. Imagine doing DR as the first use case that we have started with, as you've heard in the past, as something that instead of having your primary and secondary on your premises, have just primary and then expand primary on demand to a secondary substrate in one click. And that's really what we have launched with Xi Leap. And Xi Leap went GA as of yesterday. Okay? It was a lot of effort. It's our first born-in-the-cloud native service. It took a lot of, obviously, folks working behind the scenes to actually deliver this functionality. And we still have a long road ahead of us working with partners to actually deliver it to the world. But to kind of give you guys the state of the union with respect to what's the production-grade functionality, let's do a production-grade demo right now with the help of Manoj and Melina. Come on up, guys.
Thank you, Sunil.
Thank you.
OK, so Manoj.
We're very excited to show you today the true hybrid experience with our new Xi Cloud platform. What you are going to see very soon is how easy it is to extend your existing data center into Xi with one-click pairing and network connectivity. We'll also show you how the identical operations are performed with unified management layer as well as built-in synchronization between the two clouds so that you can perform operations whether it is on the on-prem side or whether it is on the Xi side. We are also going to show you one service today, but expect a lot more services to come on this hybrid cloud platform. The Leap, which is our first service, disaster recovery service. Let's look at it.
Sure, thank you, Manoj. So I've been managing the Hogwarts Enterprise Cloud, and I've set up a little test environment here to show you what the first steps of getting started with the Xi Cloud platform looks like. We'll navigate over to my settings and input my Nutanix credentials. That's it. That's all you have to do is type in a username and password that you already have. All our customers already have Nutanix credentials, and they don't have to make a new account or manage another password. It just works. And we've already successfully extended our on-premises cloud to a Xi availability zone. Let's go ahead and launch into the Xi side, where we're going to be able to look at how networking is managed.
Got it. And this, when we talk about pairing, it's maybe you want to spend some time talking about what actually happens.
Yeah. So it's the trust that is established between your on-prem environment and the Xi environment. We make sure that, first of all, you're allowed to extend with our identity management service. And the second, that we then allow you to go and create the network connectivity is something that Melina is going to show next.
Exactly. I've just navigated over to Xi and checked out my virtual private clouds, or VPCs. We have two that are automatically created for you. You didn't have to do that. And we have two options for how we want to extend these, my on-premises network to these VPCs, using a VPN or a direct connect. Both are a one-click experience you'd expect from Nutanix. We're going to go ahead and do the direct connect today. Now I'm just using a little browser plugin to fill this out. But this is information you'd get from whoever configured your on-premises router. And what it does is it creates that dedicated connection between on-premises and Xi.
Yeah. So what's happening in the background here, that we are sending the API request to the service exchange provider to get the service key. And this is the only information that is required on the partner direct connect provider. You go there and punch that in. That's all it takes to establish the high-speed connectivity between your on-prem environment and Xi.
The next step, we have to take this service key that was just automatically generated as part of this flow, copy it to my clipboard here, and log into my Megaport portal. This is where we'll be able to finish this step. You can see Nutanix is one of the cloud providers here. We'll create the connection, select Cloud, Nutanix, and put in the service key. It's going to go ahead and discover that connection that we just created, and that's it for the flow.
This is it. In few minutes, we were able to extend your private cloud to Xi, and you have a full-fledged hybrid cloud available now.
Yeah.
Got it. Got it. Let's go through maybe what happens behind, as the next steps beyond the pairing part.
Let's look at a true production environment now.
Perfect. I have my Hogwarts production environment here where I've been running Xi with Xi Leap for some time now. Let's check out this environment. We'll see the VMs. You can see I have a number of VMs, but I want to draw your attention to these three. Collectively, they make up a 3-tier web application. And also these external VMs. These are the 2 VMs that I have running on Xi right now. So you have a single pane of glass where you can see all your VMs and applications running on any cloud. But it wouldn't be a true hybrid experience unless we extended all your other entities as well. So we take care of that for you. We also sync your images, your categories, and your policies across both environments.
With disaster recovery, there are 2 important constructs that I would like to highlight here. One is the protection policy. The second one is the recovery plan. With protection policy, you apply your RPO and retention schemes for your recoverable entities. With protection recovery plan, that you specify all the rules that will be used in the event of actual disaster on the secondary side. So that's the rules that are played on the secondary side to bring the entire environment.
Yeah, I have this recovery plan here protecting that 3-tier web application. So first I applied a protection policy and then configured the plan. Details like the power on and boot order of the VMs after a failover, as well as network mappings you see here from my on-premises production and test network to my Xi side VPCs. What's cool here is we automatically create the subnets on Xi from your on-premises networks. This allows us to preserve the VP or the IP addresses of your VMs.
Yeah. This is really cool. What you see here, a lot of complexity on the network side that we have simplified here.
And this is an example of, like, I think what we mean by honest convergence is, it took a lot of work to essentially replicate every entity on your on-prem environment, from the network, from your data, to your control plane policies, to your network policies, to everything around it, around an app, has to be replicated.
That's correct.
So that you have an homogeneous environment.
And here particularly, Sunil, I want to highlight that we have built ground-up overlay networking on the Xi side, plus like the tools, Nutanix guest tools, with which we are able to preserve your subnet, your static IP information also on the Xi side.
Got it.
To show you how this works, I wanted to draw your attention to this .226 IP address. We're going to use that later to access our application after a failover.
And that's the public IP address for accessing your application in the event of failover, that if it happens.
But let's go ahead and look at how this all looks on the Xi side. I've just launched into Xi from my on-premises Prism, as you saw. And we're just going to go to Leap. And we're going to be able to see the categories and policies and images and how they were synced across both environments. Get to Explore. You see there's the 2 VMs I pointed out, as well as our categories and other entities. Now, because I've been running this for some time now, I have these recoverable entities here. And these are the snapshots we'll use to bring up that application in the event of a failover. And of course, we also have that recovery plan that you saw earlier with all the actions for recovery
Yeah, so
plan.
there are 3 operations that you typically use for any disaster recovery: the test, failover, and failback. While the failover and failback is pretty obvious just by the name there, the test is something that is used more often by the enterprises. It is to test that when the failover actually is going to happen, that I have tested that it's going to come back in the real scenario.
And these are like tests, and as you guys know, is like a 3 to 6 month effort normally. And you don't really know after the test works whether the actual DR event actually works or not. So this is one way that we are, if I can call it, re-platforming how you view hybrid cloud, is with these new services like test that allows you the confidence to actually test out your hybrid cloud service on demand at any time.
Yeah, and based on our discussion with the customers, what they told us, like if it is not weeks, or months, I would say, we needed really to simplify this one, the test.
Yeah.
And what we have done with one-click test, like literally you can do it in minutes, the entire test workflow.
And if it doesn't happen in minutes, I'll give you Manoj's email address to send an email to later. Right?
Perfect.
All right, what are we going to show? Are we going to show test or which one? Failover?
Why don't we do the real failover?
Yeah, let's do a real failover. That's more fun. So to show you how this works, we have those 2 availability zones that we paired up in my test environment. My on-premises is running right here, and you can see it's reachable because everything's up and running as expected, as well as Xi. Now, because this is Hogwarts, we wrote a little spell that we have to cast on our on-premises network, our on-premises environment to take it down. And this is simulating a hardware failure or some other issue you might have. So we'll come over here, and you'll watch the on-premises PC change its connectivity status from reachable to not reachable. So this has been a disaster. Hopefully, we can bring this back up. We have our recovery plan, that one-click failover that Manoj talked about. Simple dialog. It confirms it's coming from my primary location on-prem to my recovery location. This was entirely unplanned, so we better recover from our latest recovery point. And we click failover. Now, we want your failover to be successful, and so we want to run a few checks up front for you to make sure your networking is configured correctly and some of those other details that we talked about are in place. If we find any issues, we'll send you a warning, but we do that check for you, and it looks like it was successful. We can click in and see the progress here.
Yeah. While the failover is happening, I would like to highlight that Xi Cloud platform is highly secured, backed by industry's compliance and certifications with ISO 27001, 17, 18, GDPR, and many more right now in the approval process that you'll start seeing it. All of customers' data is always encrypted with unique keys, and DDoS is enabled by default. For your application security, you can bring your own firewall or use our built-in policy-based routing to whitelist your port information so that in the access of those applications from the internet that you can control. What we see here for the application that is failing over right now, we have only whitelisted port 443 and port 80. Let's look at the status of the failover.
Yeah, let's see how that's going. So we go back to our recovery plan. Looks like it's still in process, but it is still running. That's good. We can click in for details. Looks like things are going pretty well as expected. Great. Let's click over to those VMs and watch them come up in real time here. OK, so there are the 3 VMs that have showed up. And remember, the recovery plan had a boot order established. So that's what you're seeing now with the final VM being powered on.
And essentially, we have the same interface, right, which is essentially PC now exists both for your on-prem environment as well as for your Xi environment.
That's correct. That's correct, Sunil. So that's the identical operations that you see on both sides.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. And what are the things as the failover keeps happening? What are the things that one has to look for to ensure that the failback can happen? Is it just okay automatically whenever your primary environment is ready, then you just initiate a failback essentially?
That's when your primary environment is ready, you just go to your primary environment, and from there you initiate the same operation what you did on the secondary side, which is literally fail over. I know that a lot of customers has given us the feedback. I really want to call it failback, but just for the identical operations there, for us it was just a failover. Failover to primary site now.
So it looks like our failover was successful, and I just navigated here to the VM's networking information to confirm that IP address, and I'm hearing a little rumbling in the audience, so I'm guessing people have already accessed that from their phone, which I encourage you to do. We'll load it here, though, in case you don't want to, and there's our application.
All right, this particular application, you should be able to access it from your own phone right now to guess our next Xi cloud location.
What are we GA in right now?
Yeah, so Xi Leap itself had been in early access for last 3 months and had been accessed by many of our customers to rave reviews. Today, we are announcing the availability in 2 regions in North America, US East and US West, with global rollout planned for whole of 2019. Our first location outside North America is going to be clearly in EMEA. And
even though people wanted Nice.
Yeah. So let's look at the results. We're encouraging you to guess. It looks like Nice is doing pretty high on the guessing. I'm not sure if I'd guess. We're currently in London. Why are people not?
No, I think we should change the plan to go to Nice, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, so it's
not this is where you have to bring out your inner Henry Ford. Henry Ford made a famous statement. You got to listen to customers.
Right.
I'm a designer. But if you really listen to customers, you'll get faster horses instead of cars.
All right.
So this is one area where we decided to start with the UK.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and guess London, because we're in London, and I think London would be a great next location. Let's see if I'm correct.
All right. We are pleased to announce that our first location outside North America is going to be right here in London. It's going to be available in the first quarter of 2019. And shortly thereafter, expect like another region in Europe and Asia Pacific and Japan.
And we also have global connectivity right now, right?
Yes, so we have partnered with Megaport and Service Exchange from Digital Realty to bring hundreds of POP locations around the globe to provide this high-speed connectivity between your data center and Xi. as you've seen in the demo itself, it's like really easy to set up. But you also have the flexibility to use the VPN connectivity over the public internet.
Got it, got it. So that was the Xi infrastructure. Now, one other thing, as we start scaling out the Xi service, and both the platform as well as the services on top, we've talked about our partnership with GCP in the past. Obviously, they have a global footprint. The last year or so, we've been working with them on an innovative new technology to actually integrate Nutanix natively as a GCP VM on GCE. And that's because of this technology called nested virtualization that we can now integrate AHV, which is a KVM-based substrate, onto GCP's native KVM so that with no performance loss. And that's the core innovation that allowed us to now move Nutanix as is in a fully compatible way to run as a native GCP VM in any of the regions of GCP, right? And we're going to start there in a version of what we're calling as test drive and expand from there.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, Sunil, we have worked with Google very closely to do the API level integration with their nested virtualization, especially with AHV and AOS, to bring this capability. And initially, we used it for our own usage. For engineering, for example, towards the end of the release, I need a lot of burst capacity and go there and just run it. And we thought that what will be cool to bring this capability to all of our customers to experience all of the services that we provide in a test drive format.
Yep.
And what I'm particularly excited to show you is all the demo that we did right now, that you can experience it with the Xi test drive, which Malina is going to show.
GCP, thank you. So far, you've seen me launch Xi Cloud Services from inside Prism. But there's also a centralized dashboard that shows all of the services I'm running. And I can launch them directly from here. There's Leap that we've been using. And we can launch Test Drive. Now, Test Drive is a really simple application. You can pick what you want to test drive. We've been using Leap, so let's leave that. And then which GCP region you want to use for it to be deployed. And you can choose from any number of regions. We'll just leave it as the default. And click Test Drive. Perfect. Our environment's ready to go. We'll copy the password. This is our on-premises environment and our Xi side environment with all the credentials you need to log in to each. And when we pull up the console here, we'll be able to log into the on-premises side first. And I'm going to navigate to where you add in your Xi credentials. And just like that, you'll be able to try everything you just saw and experience it firsthand.
So this is essentially you're now accessing a full-blown Nutanix stack running as a GCP VM.
That's correct. That's correct.
All right, man. Great job.
That's very
Perfect.
All right. Good stuff, man.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
So there's a lot of stuff there, and obviously the product is GA now. There's a bunch of demos available, as well as a hands-on lab as well over the next couple of days. So make sure to spend some quality time, give us some feedback around Leap, and because it's going to be the foundational service on which we build more services around the Xi Cloud platform. Another service, though, that we're very happy to talk about is a true born-in-the-cloud service, which is Frame. And Frame, obviously, is a complement to what we're doing with partners like Citrix in the enterprise. But to complement those services with a born-in-the-cloud platform that offers the same benefits of what Amazon Workspaces did, but with more enterprise-grade functionality, while not being locked in to a particular cloud platform. And to talk about the power of Frame, let me welcome Nicola on stage. Come on up, Nicola. Come on, man. Good to see you, man. OK, so what are we going to maybe let's start with what was, you want to check it's working?
Yeah, so this is, just need to log in. Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe we'll start with what was innovative about Frame.
Yeah, so when we started Frame 6 years ago, we had the same approach to desktop virtualization that Nutanix had to traditional data center infrastructure. It's basically converging complicated parts of the stack and then making it really easy to use, making it very performant with the use of innovative protocol, and making it very secure.
Got it, got it. And then, of course, it has full-blown enterprise-grade functionality fused in to Nutanix's identity and all that good stuff. We'll talk a little bit about how it's come to be.
Yeah, so over the last 3 months since we came on board, it really came together with the rest of the core. And I'm very happy to announce that it's available right now and integrated with mynutanix.com, and that today, in addition to running virtual Windows desktops and apps on Amazon and Azure, you can also do that on Xi. Oh, wow. We're going into early access in December, so things are going to just start showing up in mynutanix.com console.
Show some, let's see some good stuff.
Yeah, and before you do that, this thing is on power now, or it's not on power. So, I have 5% battery here. So
just steal it from Steve Poitras.
Yeah, Steve has a different computer. Yeah. So let's see what's going on here. Let me just kind of try a different port here, seeing some live IT debugging issues. So let's see how this works. Okay. Okay, it looks like it might be charging now. Okay, so let's, while this is coming up, let's just talk about, how is this thing different from traditional VDI?
Just the set of features across infrastructure.
Exactly, exactly. So the biggest innovation on the Frame side was that we started building this full-blown virtual desktop stack in the cloud for the cloud, and we started supporting Amazon, added support for Azure, and added support for all global regions of Amazon, Azure, and also in the US, for example, there are federal clouds by these providers. But as you heard today, what we learned over the last 6 years is that customers really want freedom to choose their infrastructure, and then sometimes there is data gravity, there is networking latency that kind of really demands the workloads to be close to the data. And Frame really gives you this single pane of glass that can serve any infrastructure, and it also gives you a full-blown enterprise virtual desktop experience with all these features that enterprise admins are used to.
Got it. Is it up now?
So let's see. Let's switch to my computer. Okay. So let's give it a go. So I'm here in the same console that you just saw with the Xi Leap demo, and it is very familiar. It's the same login. You use the same account. Your configuration is the same. If down the road you set up billing here, it's all the same. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to launch Frame, and with one click, you are now in this world's best, easy-to-use, multi-cloud virtual desktop system. So just to show you, this is a very practical explanation of what multi-clouds are. I have a couple of accounts provisioned here, and you can see that some of them are on Azure, others are on AWS. They're all over the world. We have some things in Frankfurt, in Australia. We have Xi on the US East Coast, and we even have a system that's on Linux. So it's your choice of operating system, your choice of cloud, your choice of location.
Got it, man. Let's see some desktops.
So how easy is to add an account? It's really one click, and that's the simplicity that you're used to seeing from Nutanix. So if I want to create a new account on Azure in Netherlands, it's basically one click. You pick a location, you pick your cloud, boom. We are creating a new account, and that's going to take 30 seconds. I just added a new region to my multi-cloud DAS. Because it's that easy, I can go and say, hey, AWS in Frankfurt, and I can do this one on Linux, on the larger VM size, go create. I'm creating a new account now on AWS in Frankfurt, and I can do the same thing on Xi in Northern Virginia. I can do that on Windows 10. Done. So I just added 3 more regions from the same user interface to my multi-cloud DAS.
Across 3 different clouds.
Across 3 different clouds, and you know what? These things are happening so quickly and changing so quickly that even though we spend all of our time on it, it's hard to keep track. So, our message is focus on your business. You guys, focus on your business. Let us make that invisible, because it gets really complicated, and all you really want is to run your desktops and apps. So let me dive into one of these accounts that I already have pre-configured. So that's a system in London. So it's the same ease of use that you are, again, expected to see from Nutanix. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get into my Gold Master. I don't have to, for those of you that are in VDI, typically this is a process that involves creating an image, installing applications, then uploading it somewhere, sys-prepping it, and every time it's very tedious. Here, everything happens in place. So if I want to install a new application, I just open my browser. I have an installer here for a popular text editor, and I install it the same way I would on my PC. I just kind of click through a couple of screens. It all happens right there. And that application, after I kind of get out of here and publish, so let me get out of here, is available with a single click of publishing. 10 minutes later, I can have 1,000 desktops, 5,000 desktops, 10,000 desktops in any of these locations around the world.
Got it. So this is the administrative view, and it's also, by the way, if I can call it cloud infrastructure aware, right, in terms of like the sizes. And
this is completely, yeah. So let's talk about capacity for a second. It's kind of what is great about a solution like this. It gives you freedom to run everywhere. It gives you freedom to choose different sizes. So here we have, for example, in London, the system is configured to have some VMs that are 4 gig and 8 gig large. But if I go and switch, for example, to my system in Ireland, you'll see that there are Pro 32, and let me just kind of zoom in, and Pro 122. That means there are some machines with GPUs with a lot of memory, so you can create those VMs on demand. And if I go to yet another cloud, kind of on Azure, it's going to be a different instance. But you don't need to know that this is G3 extra large or 8 extra large. I mean, this is Apple-like simplicity, where it just works. You pick your size, and you do it all from a very easy-to-use user interface. And finally, a benefit of getting a brand new system that's born in the cloud is like the state-of-the-art role-based access control for user management. So you can use built-in users, but if you're running your enterprise identity on any of SAML 2-based systems, kind of like ADFS, Okta, we support Google natively. It's literally a single click. You go, you enable SAML, pick a couple of parameters from Okta or ADFS, and boom, like all of your users have access to this. So everything is very easy to use, kind of in single click.
Got it. I think the point being, even if it's born in the cloud service, it still imbibes a bunch of classical enterprise-grade capabilities while delivering the flexibility of a one-click desktop.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah, got it. So that was the admin side. User side now?
Yeah, so the user side is basically, as simple as it gets. Your users are securely logged in. They come into a browser, no applications to install, no clients to install. They're in the browser, and they can flip between any system that admins enable for them. So they can go to Xi or AWS in different locations. And just to show you kind of how easy from an end user perspective things are. So this is a desktop on Xi Cloud in Northern Virginia. And this is a full-blown virtual desktop running from 3,600 and something miles away. And it performs great. And you can have your applications. This is Windows 10. It's very responsive, works great. So
I mean, I don't know if you guys got it. He's running this desktop. He just launched into it, streamed it, and he's now using it from Northern Virginia, right? So I think that deserves an applause, man. He tried hard for that one, right? So do we have something to show?
So we have one final thing, and kind of let me show. We usually like to show kind of more graphically intensive workloads. So I have something set up on this system over here. So let's take a look. So this is now streaming from a server that's a little bit closer. It's in Ireland. And so kind of we can show things like this. So this is the venue where we're in. So again, just to make sure that everybody understands what we're looking at. I'm on my Mac here in a browser. I didn't have to install anything. There is virtually zero loads on my local CPU. This is streaming from 300 miles away. And I'm running a very heavy workload. And this is our conference center. This is hotel where some of you are. And this is like buttery smooth, like running at very, very high frame rate.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. So I know this is your classical thing. I know you've seen some of this demo before from VDI graphics vendors. What about something more hip or contemporary like us?
Yeah, so this is that I got to learn over the last 48 hours.
Yeah,
we
showed up.
Some forks.
We showed up like 4 days ago for this demo prep. We spent 2 hours prepping on the slides and the demos, and 3.5 days learning Fortnite. Right?
Yeah. So kind of, I didn't know anything about it. Now I'm a total noob. I still haven't killed anyone in the game, but kind of, I can at least.
Just wait for 2 minutes. He's going to be dead. Right?
They're gonna usually get killed in a storm. So.
All right, man.
So you can see this is a full, and you know how to do this. Okay. Yeah. So
how do you do this thing?
How do you do that thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like,
All right, enough of the demos, man.
Okay.
Time to go home. Thanks a lot, Nicola.
Thank you.
Good stuff. The last time we did a dance on stage, it was equally bad. It was 3 years ago. Good news for you guys. We only do it like once in 3 years. So that was Frame, and lots of good stuff there for you to check out. The key takeaway, guys, is all the services are GA. Okay? Obviously, there are different levels of maturity between 1.0 to 2.0 and 3.0 and so forth, but it's for us to go and consume, give us feedback, iterate on it, and we'll build this portfolio together. Okay? So just before we summarize in the key takeaways, though, just like with everything else, we have one more thing. And this time, and this again is something that if you saw Dheeraj's earnings script, coincidentally, he talks about this need for hypervisor in a world of clouds. Just like we had a hypervisor in the world of servers, we need a hypervisor in the world of clouds. And if you think about the problem that we solved with hyperconvergence, it was about fundamentally solving for data mobility, right? That was our core IP. And when you look in the world of clouds, a true hyperconverged cloud, not hybrid cloud, is about app mobility. And to talk about that for the final demo, let's welcome Steve Hercules Poitras. Come on up, Steve. How you doing? Good to see you, man.
Good to see you, too.
Steve has been married. He's got a kid now, as you know. He's been putting on some weight, so be nice to him.
I did tuck my shirt in this time.
Yeah.
I learned my
kind of covers up for that chubby flap there. But okay.
Man.
So what are we going to talk about today, man?
Yeah, so one of the key things that was mentioned earlier today was the difficulty in terms of app mobility. When we start thinking about hybrid environments, this is applications that are existing out there in the cloud as well as are on-premise. Now, what we're going to show today is how we can simplify that app mobility across cloud, on-prem, and vice versa.
And this is built into COM.
This is built into COM, correct.
Got it. And that's what we're going to talk about is this built-in app mobility that's coming shortly. That's a fusion of capabilities inside our core AOS substrate, COM, along with Beam and a couple of things, right?
Yeah, so let's take a look. So over here, we can see our COM interface. So here we have a few applications which have been deployed via these COM blueprints. Let's go and take a look at one of these. So this is just going to load the application. If we look at the associated services, we can see that there's 3 different service tiers as part of this COM blueprint. And looking at the details on the service tiers, we can actually get the associated AWS AMI as well as IP address information. So here we can see it's actually running out in AWS. Now, one of the key things is if this is deployed in AWS, obviously we have supported the ability to provision into AWS Azure on-premise. But what if you want to migrate those workloads to a different target environment? So that's where what we have is you can now see this migrate button here. So let's go ahead and click on that. Now, what this will do is for blueprints deployed via COM, it'll actually leverage extract on the back end and allow us to migrate this from AWS to AHV and vice versa. So here we can see our source application, which is this Arceus app. We're going to migrate this to AHV, and then we can specify our cutover. So our cutover is when we actually want to bring the target application live and make that the active app. So if we go ahead and click Next, here we can actually see the associated services running in AWS with their corresponding services or targeted services running on AHV. Now, obviously, we don't have a ton of time today, so I'm actually going to hop over to an existing migration, which I can show here. And so if I click on this, this will actually bring up a pre-existing migration plan. So here we can see it finished the pre-migrate steps. It's going through the migration process. And then when we want to cut this over, we can go ahead and do so. So let's go ahead and take a look at this source application. So if we go over here to services, just for time's sake, we're just using a single service in this scenario to show this and demonstrate this cutover. And then over here, we can actually see the AWS details. Now, one of the key things to highlight here is this IP address. So this 101.33, we're actually running an application and web service on this, which we'll take a look at here in a sec. We can see the associated region, availability zone, as well as AMI ID. Now, if we want to look at the actual service running on this, let's go ahead and launch this football betting app. Now, I know you're a huge football fan. We're in Europe, and it's always fun to gamble a little bit. And this is a totally legal gambling site
yeah,
running
totally
here.
legal. But, yeah, sure.
But what this allows us to do is, obviously, this is a sample app, Bitcoin accepted, but allows us to choose our picks. So here are some upcoming Premier League games. And I know you have some perspectives on this, so who would you want
Yeah, I'm sure Bournemouth is going to beat Man City, right? Yeah. No. Who's losing? It's your money or my money?
I may need to ask for a pay raise after this.
Okay, got it. Let's go with Man City. Who wants Man City? I'm pretty sure Man
City's
City's
going
going to win. I think I would have chosen Fulham, but since Michael Ballack was here, let's go with Chelsea.
Yeah, that's a safe pick.
Right? And then the last one, it's pretty hard. I don't know. What do you guys think? West Ham against Cardiff? West Ham. Let's do West Ham.
West Ham?
Yep.
All right, perfect. So now remember these picks?
Against Cardiff.
Oh, against Cardiff, okay. We'll do both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now remember these picks. So these are actually persisted in this service running on AWS. Now we're going to go ahead and cut this over to AHV. So to do that, we'll go back to our migrations, and we'll go ahead and click cutover. We can see here the cutover has been initiated. So what this is going to do is actually fully instantiate this target application on AHV.
Now, while that's happening, maybe just zoom up a little bit about, if you think about the overall portfolio here, nobody really just goes and says, migrate and cut over. You would actually need an environment that first discovers and assesses your environments, your workloads, across your clouds, provides you that single unified cost view, and then provides recommendations based on the type of workload, right? And that's what Beam is for.
Yep.
Do you want to show Beam, or how do you want to do this first?
Yeah, let's take a look at Beam.
Yeah.
So here, if we hop over to our My Nutanix portal, let's go ahead and log in here. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and launch into Beam. Now, one of the key things that Beam provided previously was cost governance as well as compliance across your cloud deployments. So if we hop over here to our global dashboard, we can now see that not only can I view my AWS, my Azure spend, I can now view my Nutanix spend all through Beam. And this is a very, very critical thing, is we've expanded Beam's capabilities for cost governance, not just across cloud deployments, but expanded that to on-premise deployments now as well.
Got it. And then we can now obviously look at the workloads, the profile of the workloads, whether they're elastic and predictable, and then the appropriate costing, right?
Yeah. So data is one thing, visibility is one thing, but the ability to actually take that data or take that information and actually act on it is much more critical, right? So if we look over here to our workload analysis, we can actually see Beam is recommending that we migrate 5 workloads, optimize 3 other workloads, as well as retain 2 other workloads. And that's one of the key things. So let's take a look at this a little further. So here we can actually see we have our workloads, our KS workload, which we showed previously, which is running on AWS. We also have some running on Azure, and also some running on Nutanix. Now, over here on the right-hand side, we can see our current cost, as well as our potential savings. So if we go down here to optimize, we can actually see this recommendation is to keep this application running on AWS, but there's the ability to actually optimize this where we can perform some cost savings.
Got it.
So if we click on optimize, we can actually see there's some unused cloud resources, some inefficient resources, so over-provisioned resources, those sorts of things. So we could actually clean those up and actually save money there while continuing to run on AWS.
So that's classic, where it makes sense, let's optimize. If it's cheaper and better, if it's elastic, retain it. And then, of course, where it makes sense, if it's a predictable workload, click on migrate.
Yep. Yeah, so we hop over here. This is our RKS application. We can actually see this workload pattern is purely static. So we provision some M4XL instances. This is running this web service and gambling app, but it's static, right? And this is a perfectly situated application to run on-premise on Nutanix. So not only can we get the visibility as well as the recommendation, we actually see this migrate button here. So if we go ahead and click on this migrate button, this will actually launch us into Calm, and it will walk us through that migration process and workflow. So here, just in a few clicks, we can see the visibility in Beam. We can see the recommendation and cost savings by migrating this from AWS to AHV. And we can also initiate that cutover and migration here as well.
Got it. Do you want to check on, by the way, maybe while you're checking on cutover, just talk a little bit about that, this core IP for calm.migrate, which is powered by Extract Technology, took a lot of work because getting stuff into Amazon, relatively easy. Getting out of it is very hard.
Yeah.
Right? So what did we do?
Yeah, so obviously we do a few core things. The first one is the discovery and mapping process. So if we think about EC2 instances, AMIs, these sorts of things, they all have correlated specifications, number of vCPUs, memory, those sorts of things. So one of the first things we do is discover all those sizes and then perform a mapping to what the equivalent would be running on the target system. So an M4XL in AWS would correspond to a VM of XYZ size on AHV. Obviously, we do the same for storage as well as network. Now, once we've actually done that mapping, we know the quantity of virtual machines, we know the size of those virtual machines, we can actually then start to provision those instances on AHV. So we'll provision the network, ensure that it exists. We'll provision those AHV VMs, and we'll also provision the storage associated. Now, the next piece is one of the most difficult. It's how do I get my data from AWS or from some cloud provider to AHV or vice versa? And that's where we've developed very, very intelligent software as well as our own internal CBT driver. So once we perform that full initial sync, we can then only migrate the delta changes or delta data on top of that. And that's a critical thing when we start talking about this data gravity. If I have to migrate a terabyte every single time, physics is not going to allow me to do that. However, if I have a terabyte but only 50 gigs of change data, I only migrate that 50 gigabytes of data.
And then the last step is, of course, to actually do the cutover.
Yeah, it's to power it on and cut over.
All right, man, let's just check it out if it's done.
So let's check it out. So here we can see we have our target application migrated to AHV. If we look at this, let's go over to services, and we can actually see here in a second all the associated details of this running on AHV.
Now, when this cutover happens, obviously it can take many minutes as we look at it and all, but the idea would be that the app, as we know of, between the storage settings, the network settings, obviously the runtime settings are all copied over, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. So here we can actually see the associated AHV details for this VM. We can see the cloud it's running on is Nutanix, as well as an internal IP address. So this is not the public IP of this instance running on AWS. This is actually an internal IP running on our internal corporate
I'll go
network.
check it out then. Yeah.
Yep, let's do it. So let's click over here to Overview. We launch our betting app. We can see this is now using that internal IP address.
Got it.
And we have some of our picks here.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Great job, Steve. Thank you, man.
Thanks, man.
As built-in app mobility, go check out the demo there. So as Steve was talking about, basically the point being that you'll see more and more of this technology as we start unrolling things out. With now that the full suite of services are there, how do we stitch them together so we provide you that harmonized multi-cloud service across different types of cloud form factors? The last thing that I did want to talk to you about, one last slide, is the fact that, look, normally when we do this conference, we have a lot of things that we show, which is things that are coming, things that are available. And I just want to capture one slide that summarizes what we've talked about in between what's available today and what's coming. And normally this slide would show a half and half or a third and two-thirds, and this is the first conference where most of the services that we talked about are GA. While we still have a ton of innovation coming, we really look forward to working with you guys. Continue to give us feedback. Have a great time over the next few days. We'll see you at the bar tonight again, okay? Bye.